a lot for the Thanks a lot for the invitation and the opportunity to share these computations with you. So yeah, the topic of the talk today will be the kinetic Zuniev-Zeldovich effect. Before starting the talk, I wanted to just advertise a paper that came out today on arXiv or yesterday night about the standard thermal Zuniev-Zeldovich effect, but not of the cosmic microwave background, rather on the cosmic infrared background. So as far as we know, this is the first time that an actual computation of the distortion of the CIB monopole is carried out. And this is work led by a graduate student at Columbia, Alina Sabir. And I'm sure she will be very happy to tell you about the details of this computation if you are interested. So I've given this presentation a few times before and realized that I should skip the introduction today because many of you know very well, I guess, what I'm going to talk about, and I guess we could dive directly into the technical details. So today I'm going to present a computation, a new computation based on the HALO model that predicts the cross correlations between the square of the KSZ field and large-scale structure tracer that I will denote X in the remainder of the talk. X can denote the galaxy number density field. It can denote also galaxy lensing or CMB lensing. This type of estimator is slightly different than the more popular estimators that many of you are probably more familiar with than I am myself. So the previous estimators that are certainly more popular than the one I will talk about today are not looking at cross correlations between T squared and G, but rather between T and G squared. And they require high precision measurement of the redshift of galaxies, so spectroscopic surveys. Unlike those, here we can use photometric surveys because we actually do not need to reconstruct the velocity field since we square the temperature map before taking the power spectrum with the tracer. So making these computations meant I had to study lots of different cross correlation and developed my HALO model called a code that was initially dedicated to the TSZ power spectrum into a full-fledged HALO model code that can compute many different cross correlations. So with this paper, still unpublished, we are releasing the first, let's say, official version of class SZ. So I invite you to take a look also if you are interested in this. So a little bit of definitions and assumptions before I present the technical computation of the T squared X cross correlations. I will trade implicitly wave number and multiples with each other, implicitly assuming the Limber approximation that amounts to this equation here. I will write integral over comoving volumes as integral over d small v, and numerically the way they are implemented is via the right-hand side of this equation, which goes on the logarithmic grid in 1 plus z. I will denote the Fourier transform of the HALO profiles by the letter small u with a hat. A denotes generic large-scale structure tracer, and K is the wave number or multiple. The formula is reminded here. For mass integrals, I will use the notation bracket subscript n, which, for instance, here on A, we take the integral over the HALO mass function of the Fourier transform profile of A. So numerically, these are also implemented as an integral over log of mass with the Halo mass function near D and dm. So while doing those computations, I had to deal with several subtleties of the Halo model. In particular, most of our Halo model ingredients, like the Halo mass functions, they are calibrated on n-body simulations or on hydro simulations. And those simulations, typically, they don't go at very low mass. For instance, the Tinker Halo mass function is defined from masses of around 10 to the 10 solar masses. When we want to compute the power spectrum of matter, there is important contribution from objects of masses that are lower than that. And somehow we need to have a prescription to circumvent this issue. So this came up in discussion with Emmanuel Chan in particular. And he explained to me a way of enforcing the Halo model consistency, which is that the integral of the Halo mass function of over all halos should amount to the mean density of matter with similar consistency condition on the linear bias and second order bias. So to enforce this assumption, we need to adopt the contribution from low mass, like I just said before, and to do so, we can formally replace the Halo mass function with the Halo mass function plus delta function, and the counter term here denoted n mean, which depending on the integral we have to deal with, will take the expressions that I have written here. So these counter terms, they can be computed prealably and tabulate over a Redshift grid so that we can access them efficiently when we perform our other numerical computations. So for example, when you want to compute the one Halo term of the matter power spectrum, you have to integrate the product of two Fourier transform of the matter field. It can be an NFW profile traditionally. And to enforce the Halo model consistency, we write this integral over all objects as the restricted mass integral plus the counter terms, which is the n mean of z that I showed on the previous slide, times the integrand evaluated at the minimal mass. So similarly, when we have to deal with two Halo term or three Halo term with involving the first or second order biases, we do the same with a different counter term times the integrand evaluated at the lower mass threshold. So on this plots from Manu, you can see that, for instance, at z equal 1, the counter terms which are showed in dot dashed line can be very important and basically crucial to predict the correct amplitude of the matter power spectrum. For other tracers, for instance, the electron pressure field that comes up in the TSE power spectrum computation, it's less important typically because electron pressure is sensitive to more massive halos, and the low mass halos don't play a role in the full integrated observable. But here in the work that I am presenting here, we are dealing with typically density profiles, and there it's like for matter, we really need these consistency conditions to be implemented properly. So here is just a reminder of a standard calculation that I think many of you will have seen. I will just say about this that in nonlinear scale, Maya and Frey in 2002 showed that we can write the CL of the KZ effect that would appear in multi-frequency power spectrum of multi-frequency power spectrum of CMB maps as an integral over volume times the power spectrum of the baryon over density times the velocity dispersion. So these simplifying assumptions here will be crucial for us also. We will always see the sigma v square times, not the power spectrum, but the bispectrum, as I will show. The sigma v square is easily calculated by integrating the matter power spectrum times the growth rate, FD, here. And in the redshift kernel of the KSZ effect here, we recognize the electron density field, which is proportional to the baryon fraction, the free electron fraction, and the mean matter density. Now the piece of the computation that is more interesting to us is the power spectrum of the baryon over density. And for this, we have several choices that we can make, which I will continue to use in the next part of the talk. We can either take a rescaled NFW profile, so FB times the NFW profile, or take more sophisticated gas density profiles, which have been studied in simulations by Nick Battaglia in particular. So here I will always have this comparison between the FB times NFW profile, the adiabatic formula of Nick, and the formula that includes AGN feedback into the simulations and therefore the parametrization. And the main point to notice here, well, first is that I always normalize those different profiles so that the mass at R200 is the same. And the second thing is that with this normalization that is a natural choice, we then see that at low radius, at small scale, the AGN profile has less matter simply because when you inject energy in halos, the material is pushed at larger radius and finds itself therefore at larger scales. So looking at this power spectrum of the baryon over density, now here on the right plot compared to the NFW profile. So the NFW profile would yield this typically, well, on the left plot, it would yield this PMM 1 plus 2 halo in dotted line. So that's the halo model computation with the NFW profile. And as many of you know, it compares very well with the halo fit matter power spectrum that you can compute from class, except within a certain range of intermediate scale between the 1 and 2 halo term. But on nonlinear scale, the halo model here predicts very well what n-body simulation tells us about the nonlinear regime. The consistency condition is here shown in comparing this dotted line with the shade gray line. And we see that indeed for the matter power spectrum, it's very important to take into account. If I don't take the consistency condition and compute the matter power spectrum, I find 10 to the 3 in the amplitude, while it should be 10 to the 4. So now to go into the baryon over density power spectrum with the different prescription, AGN or adiabatic, which essentially amount to different values for this parameter in the density profile. I find different behavior, and like I pointed out in the previous slide with the AGN feedback formula, I find a power that is significantly less than with adiabatic or with rescaled NFW.
I'm just curious, like, what is this AGN calibrated from?
So this is calibrated from Nick's 2010 papers.
Okay, but
Nick Battaglia.
Okay.
So it's hydro simulations, and yeah, I don't know the exact details of all the simulations, but they have been standardly used in the literature. So that seemed to have been the most straightforward choices. So now there are other, I think recently, people have been studying the profiles in the CAMELS hydro simulations with emulator. So that could be the next step to implement there. But here it's good because I have the analytical formula, I can study those parametrization easily. So yeah, that summarizes essentially what I explained before. And now to go into the next step, we are not interested in the CLKZ square that we would have in taking the power spectrum of CMB maps, but we are interested in the cross correlation between squared temperature maps with a large scale structure tracer. So by squaring the temperature map, I circumvent the fact that the velocities projected along the line of sight can have a plus or a minus sign as in same probability. So that I can then take the cross correlation with X and find something that is non-vanishing. So the only challenge that comes up when you square the temperature map in position space is that when you go to multiple space, as you want to take the power spectrum with another tracer, you have a convolution that is written there. So you have to integrate over all scales, and there is no bounds in this integral. Essentially, it should go from 2 to a very large L. So in this power spectrum, CLKZ square X, we have contribution from all scales in that power spectrum here, due to the convolution there. So that also hints to the fact that it's an observable that will have a difficult qualitative interpretation because it mixes many scales. And the fact that it mixes many scales is challenging because it means that if the maps have not been cleaned to a very high degree, if they still have foreground contamination on large scales, for instance, we will have those contributions that will show up in the CLKZ square. So a trick to avoid having this spurious contamination is to filter the maps with a filter that only takes out the scales where the KZ square, the KZ effect is important. So typically around 3,000 to 6,000 in multiple. So this filter is simply built by taking the CLKZ square from the template that we get from simulations, divided by the total power spectrum of the CMB map. So now we take the power spectrum, not of the CMB map, but of the filtered CMB map. And that means that in this convolution that appears here, I also have the filter that will be part of the equation. So I think I essentially have explained this now in details. We have this integral to evaluate coming from the two copies of the KSZ field. We have the square of the kernel of the KSZ effect that I showed initially. And from the large scale structure tracer, we also have a redshift dependent kernel WX here in this equation. And at the end of this expression, you see the bispectrum of KSZ square cross X here written in terms of the visibility weighted velocity, which is what determines the KSZ effect. So now looking at the actual definition of the CLKZ square X power spectrum, we can write it in this way, and we have to evaluate this convolution over filter at L prime, filter at L plus L prime times the bispectrum. The first challenge is to compute this actual bispectrum, and the second challenge is to evaluate this integral in a descent time. So regarding the first challenge to evaluate the bispectrum, we can use the same assumption as Ma and Frey did in 2002, which is that in the nonlinear regime, which is the one we expect will contribute more to this observable, the velocity field is determined by linear modes, and those do not correlate with the small scale baryon density perturbation. So we can factor out the velocity dispersion and write the actual bispectrum as sigma v squared times B. This assumption and its validity are studied in some detail in an early paper by DDO in 2004, I think. And yeah, I have not yet checked myself all these terms and their importance, but this is certainly something that will be interesting to look at. And now, essentially, the challenge is, since we have factored out the velocity dispersion, to evaluate the bispectrum of delta B times X. So to do this, what my collaborators did in the past, when they made the first measurement of this observable, in particular Simone Ferraro and Colin Hill, they wrote the bispectrum of delta BX as some bias. They were looking at galaxies, so some an effective galaxy bias times the bispectrum of matter evaluated in the nonlinear regime. And the difficulty here is to have an expression for the nonlinear bispectrum of matter that is as exact, as accurate as possible. The standard strategy is to take a proposed phenomenological formula that was initially proposed by Scott Chimaro and Kochman in 2001, and then revisited several times in the last decades, where we adopt a formula for the nonlinear bispectrum that is inspired from the tree-level formula involving the F2 kernel here, but with a slightly different coefficient in these three different terms that are fitted to n-body simulation. So I don't show the actual formula of F2F, but it's very similar to the standard F2 kernel with 8 to 10 or more terms that are fitted to simulations. And we do not take the linear matter power spectrum there, but the nonlinear matter power spectrum. And furthermore, we have to consider all the relevant permutation between the different scales. So with this approach, which I refer to as the effective approach, we have to integrate over the polar plane the products of filters with the effective formula for the nonlinear bispectrum. And that is in itself a very challenging computation, because we not only have to integrate over volume and masses, which is already two integrals, but now also over theta and L prime. And we have to do the integral over theta and L prime at each point of mass and redshift. So yeah, in itself, it's a challenging and time-consuming computation. I have implemented it in my code and obtained somewhat smoother result than was previously obtained. Another shortcoming of this approach is that it does not allow an accurate treatment of the small-scale profile of the tracer X. So here we have modeled the galaxy over density simply as BG times delta M, with bias BG that only depends on redshift. But in fact, in reality, galaxies are distributed within halos in more complicated way, and certainly a more accurate approach would be to employ an actual HOD for the galaxy population. And that cannot be done with this effective approach, but it can be done with the halo model approach that I'm going to show now. So as a solution to this small scale regime that is not probed and the numerically challenging aspects of the previous approach, we have the halo model computation. There we evaluate the bispectrum of delta BX as a sum of three different terms. There is a one halo term, which has the three mass elements correlated within the same halo, a two halo term, where two are in one halo and another mass element in another halo, and the three halo term, where the three mass elements are distributed in each distinct halo. So there is here on the top row of this plot, I showed the matter bispectrum computed at z equal 1 for different bispectrum configuration. And according to the different formulas that are on the market, so we have the 3-level formula, which is just F2 times P plus permutation. The Guilmarin formula that's used for the effective approach computation I just showed in gray here, and also the older one of Scott-Shimaru and Kochman, which add the wiggles from BAOs, which are spurious here, in fact, there. And in the bottom plot, it's the actual bispectrum of delta B times delta G, where rather than having this effective nonlinear regime, I have implemented an actual HOD, which is why the prediction of the bispectrum here differs in the Halo model than in the effective approach. And on large scales, we see also a slight difference that is not naively expected, but which comes from the second order bias that is also part of the matter bispectrum equation. So in more detail here, I have the actual equation written. So B1H, which is an integral over the products of 3 profile transforms, B2H, which has 2 integral, and B3H, which now has 1 integral for each mass element within each halo. And if you look carefully at this expression, you will realize that they are all separable with respect to scales. It's obvious for all of these terms, except for the term involving F2, but you can actually write F2 in a separable way by simply expanding the cosine in terms of wave numbers. So just expand the expression as much as you can with the wave numbers K1, K2, K3, and you find this expression with 6 terms here. So the next challenge that I mentioned before was, once we have the matter bispectrum, we have to evaluate the convolution over K1 and K2, or L prime and L plus L prime. And evaluating this convolution here becomes much more simpler because we have this separable expression, and therefore we can invoke the convolution theorem to replace the convolutions by products in Fourier space. So,
but yeah, in principle, like the HOD approach you did, you could also do it for velocities. You could also like write the velocity down.
That's right.
But you only did it for densities.
Yeah, for densities. For the velocities, I always keep them separate. The velocities, they are only involved in the velocity dispersion, which eventually is just a function of redshift, because it's the integral of P of K times growth factor. So yeah, here with this convolution theorem trick, not only the Halo model becomes able to probe the nonlinear, the small scale regime of halos, but also it's actually faster to evaluate. Here on the 3-halo term, I have in detail how this is done. I will skip on that, but essentially you have to evaluate a sum of inverse Fourier transform, of products of Fourier transform, and there is always the term that depends on K3 or L at the end. So the results are shown here for the CLKZ square cross galaxy with the effective approach prediction in dashed gray line and the Halo model prediction in red. And the other curves correspond to the split between the Halo model contributions, so 1, 2, and 3 Halo term. So the top rows shows the predicted power spectrum for a Planck CMB map, and the bottom row for an advanced ACT CMB map. And the main difference is just, well, mainly appearing from the fact that the filter is very different. In particular, with advanced ACT, we are able to probe much smaller scales and therefore much higher multiples. And so the filter, well, the noise actually will kick in at much higher L than in Planck, which is why the Planck curves, they dive at around 3,000 and the ACT curve more at around 7,000 or 9,000. Advanced ACT, I should say. Yeah, then looking into details, the details of this, there is many interesting things to be said. I think the most important observation we can make is that the 2-halo term plays an important role in this observable, and it's because it's essentially associated with the squeeze limit of the bispectrum, where you have a galaxy and a KSZ element that are correlated in one halo and another mass element in a different halo. And what's important to have in mind is that the 2-halo term is typically not represented by these effective formulas for the nonlinear bispectra, since they are based on the 3-level expression. So the effective approach will inevitably miss the larger scale regime. And at smaller scale, what plays here is the HODs and the radial profile of the density. So then we can use those predictions to do some physics. So the first things that come to mind is to use the tracer X as a redshift selecting tracer. So if you use Galaxy, you can select different Galaxy samples whose redshift distribution will peak at different redshift. The tracer X also can select halos in terms of their masses. And with that, we can make a tomography of the gas and clearly identify whether the gas follow more an adiabatic profile or a profile that's more determined by NFW or by AGN feedbacks. So since the KSZ square cross X depends on X, it's also sensitive to the details of the tracer X. So here, for instance, for galaxies, I illustrate that the power spectrum will be sensitive to the actual HOD. So now if we try to constrain everything at once, it may be difficult because the gas parameters will inevitably be degenerate with those HOD parameters. And the idea there is to add more cross or autocorrelation with other tracer to break degeneracies and eventually constrain the gas profile. So yeah, on this slide, I just wanted to remind that when making the measurement of such cross correlations, there is inevitably a contribution from CMB lensing. If you look at the expansion of the temperature field in terms of the lensing potential, the next important term is that grad phi, grad theta. And if you take the square of that times the tracer X, the next important cross correlation will be phi X times the squared temperature. So then we have a lensing terms that is also part of the equation and which we need to marginalize over when we make the actual constraint analysis, which is what Ola had done in a previous paper. And here I also advertise a forthcoming paper where we constrain the HOD of unwise galaxy in order to use it for a KSZ square cross G analysis. Yeah, this is basically my last slide, I think. So here we have the full picture of the observable with the 3 different halo model contribution, the lensing term that is this pink line, and the size of the covariance matrix or of the error bars showed in gray color. Last year, we used the Planck temperature map cross-correlated with Unwise galaxy to make a new measurement of Chi-square cross galaxy led by Ola. And there we were not able to constrain anything about the small scale region of the halos, but rather the overall amplitude of the effect, which from which you can infer a constraint on the baryon fraction that are reminded here. The values look slightly strange, but if you look closely, you will realize they are not in actual tension with the cosmic baryon fraction in terms of sigmas. Yeah, the next step here, which I'm planning to finish before submitting this work, is actual forecast analysis, where I use all this pipeline in order to set forecasts on the gas profile parameters, which hopefully we will then measure with advanced ACT, SO, and CMBS4. Yeah, so thanks a lot for listening, and I look forward to discussing if you have questions.
Thanks, Boris. So, the questions? Yeah, I had one. Sorry. Maybe I misunderstood something when you said that there is an effective F2 kernel.
Yes.
It had some pre-coefficients in it, but then in the next slide, you showed that the coefficients were actually fixed, if I remember correctly, to the usual one. So maybe there was before. Yeah, in this slide, the coefficients seem to be fixed to the like 3 level.
Oh, okay.
But before, maybe I missed.
Yeah. So in the effective approach, you use an expression of F2 that looks like this one, but is actually slightly different because of some coefficients that would be in front of 5, 7, 1 half, and 2, 7.
Yes.
So that's the idea of the effective approach, is to recycle the 3-level bispectrum formula and make it able to fit the nonlinear scale by incorporating more freedom here in this expression.
But in the next slide, you don't have this. So here the F2 is the.
Yeah, so here the 3-halo term typically will predict the bispectrum on linear scale.
Oh, okay.
So you need just F the linear regime, which is described by F2. And what does the job of predicting the nonlinear regime is the 1 and 2 halo terms that you had. So here the F2 that you need to use is just the simple function that is there.
Mm-hmm.
And in the effective approach, because of those coefficients which involve scales, it ends up not being a separable expression. So you have to do the convolution explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
In this analysis, you're working mass-based HOD. So, like for ionized gas, like you think assembly bias or the secondary bias might play an effect?
Could we have, we can't hear the questions very well over here. Could you maybe come closer or repeat?
Maybe you can repeat. Yeah. So I was just asking, like in the talk, you use the mass-based HOD approach.
Yeah.
But if you use the secondary biases or assembly biases, does that play an effect for the ionized gas?
So here, my understanding of this, I don't have a clear answer to this question. But is that higher order biases, typically they will play a role. Here they seem to play a role on the 3-halo terms, and that's important only on more linear scales, which I don't think in the end are extremely decisive for the Chi-square cross galaxy power spectrum. You see here the 3-halo term is very subdominant in most of these cases. It depends. Yeah, here it's more important. I will look into that in more details. And Oliver also gave me some further expressions of bias that I should look at, like tidal biases, etc. But yeah, I expect those differences to actually move the 3-halo term expression rather than the 2-halo and 1-halo, which are more important for me.
Boris?
Yes?
Very nice stuff. Could you say a little bit more about you said you're applying this to WISE. Is the idea to then apply this to like many different galaxy samples to look at how these different models play out with different galaxy samples, or what's your vision for it?
Yeah, so currently we are working with the unwise galaxy samples. So there are 3 samples of galaxies. I think I have the redshift distribution here for 2 of them. So one is peaked at around 0.6, the other one at 1.5. And the next steps would be to use DES galaxies. So we could think of doing ACT cross DES there. So ACT squared cross DES. And yeah, in the further future, I guess, I'm planning here to make the forecast for LSST and Euclid. So that should be interesting too. And so here, one thing that I should say is that if you take galaxy over density, you have to deal with the degeneracies with HOD parameters, which can be complicated. So one way to measure the HOD parameter is to measure galaxy clustering or galaxy-galaxy lensing. But in fact, all the formalism that I have presented here, you can use X equal galaxy lensing, for instance, where there is no HOD. So there, the galaxy lensing kernel is just the typical lensing kernel. And it's much easier to much more under control, I would say. So as a next plan, as a next step, also, we plan to do KZ square cross galaxy lensing. And yeah, just to add, currently in the code, we have the implementation for KZ square cross galaxy, galaxy lensing, and CMB lensing, which could also be very interesting to look at.
Cool, thank you.
For the pressure profile, so there are also like constraints coming from TSZ cross shear or TSZ cross galaxies. So I'm just naively wondering, like, how do your constraints compare? Are they comparable?
So currently, based on this observable, the only constraints that we have been working on, we are just looking at the overall amplitude for the baryon fraction. The pressure profile itself, here you are not sensitive to it because if you cross-correlate KSZ with galaxies, you are sensitive to the density and the galaxy density field. Now, another observable you could think of as a combination to break further degeneracies, you could do KSZ square cross TSZ, which could be interesting. In fact, there is a very old paper, I think, by Couret in 2001, where he wrote the expression for KSZ squared, TSZ squared. It was funny to see.
So you said there was a contribution from lensing. How big is it? Where?
Oh, in fact, the contribution from lensing is actually very important. In the Planck CMB case, we found that the lensing term was actually yeah, basically 30 times this amplitude, or here on this plot, you can see the actual lensing term in dashed line. So that's the best fit lensing term compared to the KSZ square cross galaxy term.
Are there
Is anyone else having audio issues?
Yeah, we were having also here. I don't know.
But what I should say is that the lensing term scale dependence is super different than that of KSZ square cross X. So if you, well, if you try to make the fit, they will generally separate quite well.
Okay. Okay.
Did you want to add something?
No, I was just wondering if this prediction, if it had, there were some free parameters to do with the bias, or what are the uncertainties on the lensing?
So the lensing. So if you have the Fallot model implemented, the lensing term is completely calculable. As you can see here, it's essentially CL phi cross X, or lensing cross galaxy, times convolution of CL. This is CLTP primary with the filters. So if we put in the full halo model, this term is actually completely determined. Then what we did in the analysis last year was based on a template. So Simone had computed a fiducial prediction for this term, and we were fitting a separate amplitude for the lensing. And I think it also has a bias, effective galaxy bias factor as well.
Yeah, because that would enter in the CL.
Yeah, exactly.
CLPsi-X is not completely known, right?
Yeah. So there is BG that would be there. But if you have the HOD, then the bias is into the expression.
Okay, are there other questions for Boris? So if not, we can thank him again for the very nice talk. And
Yeah, thank you.